Forrest. I'm known online as the Modern Alchemist. And this is class number 1, where we'll be discussing the language, the science, and the art of alchemy. Hello world, this is my very first live broadcast. So those of you who are out there, I have my dear friend Tony back here. He's monitoring the voice of the world. So he'll be looking at the chat feed, and any Twitter updates. You can reach me at @modernalchemy76 at Twitter, and you can leave a little thing there. So if you have questions about what we're covering, you can fire them off, and if I get a lot of the same question, then Tony will mention that to me and we'll cover it right now live. So this is your big opportunity. So today we're talking about the language, science, art of alchemy. So first off, the question that I'm going to ask those of you who are here, how would you define what language is? And I'm looking for a real core, fundamental definition of what happens when we use language. The Supreme Court says that any form of expression is an execution of language, which is why we have so much money involved in our politics today. Because exercising my right to spend my dollar is an expression of language. I'm saying something. So that's one interpretation of what language is. But you can see our government is recognizing that language is a bit more expansive than just what's happening right now as I'm talking in English. Okay? Welcome! Aha, more people. Outstanding. And I have an extra chair. Here we go. If you guys need an extra chair. I got 2 here. Right on. And you guys, we're actually live with Planet Earth. So we're broadcasting live here for the Modern Alchemist channel. And you can sit down if you want, or stand, it doesn't matter. Right now we're talking about the language, science, and art of alchemy. And as I was just mentioning, language is the first thing that we want to discuss. And the reason for it is because we need to put this into terms that you can grasp with your brain, with your consciousness. It's more than just talking. It's more than just there's French, or German, or Dutch, or English, or Swahili. It's more than that. There's a process engaged when you utilize language which is unique. And in order to understand alchemy, you have to understand how that process affects your consciousness. So, if I say, for instance, the word snowy owl, what comes to mind? Right? Now, do you just see the word snowy owl, or do you actually see a white bird with soft plumage and large eyes, maybe in a forest with snow in the background, and you know, the whole thing, right? That is transmutation. I took a fragment of an idea in my brain. I gave a physical representation of that by providing vibration which your ears heard, and your brain said, snowfield with a white bird. That is language. Language alters consciousness, which is why it is constantly in the battlefield today in our legal systems. Why it is always being grappled with, because the meaning of a word can translate into the meaning of conscious experience, right? Which is why your Inuits have over 32 words to describe snow, because there's a lot of different varieties of that, you know, whereas we kind of like it's white and snow, and in the Northwest it's wet. But there, it's a lot different. On the other hand, I bet you people in the Northwest can describe rain in about 32 different ways, right? Because there's drizzle, and there's misty, and there's like, literally we can describe all sorts of different kinds of rain, because that's part of our conscious experience. So language is a big key part of that, which means that symbols are a part of language. Everything that you see in this room, and by the way, I want to super duper thank Earth Magic for providing us this excellent place, a beautiful classroom, wonderful store, and you guys totally need to come by and see Maggie and Ray. They're awesome, and they have their own lapidary here. Like, they have lots of stones in raw form, which is really rare to find these days. So anyway, that aside, I just had to point that out because it really is an awesome place to stand and teach. It's really pretty in here. That aside, language then facilitates the mode by which we express ourselves, okay? But that mode of expression is an alteration of conscious process, which is why you can become an offender for a single word. I could right now absolutely annihilate my personal credibility by just saying certain words, right? And it would alter the entire conscious apprehension of everyone in the world about me. This is why politicians have such bad times with these gaps, because they're there and they're getting looked at and analyzed, and everyone's introspecting on what did he possibly mean, because they're trying to interpret language and their feeling, which means that language evokes feeling as well as a conscious process up here. It's not simply something static. Language elevates the heart or depreciates the heart, and it creates within the person, like if you use language in order to degrade a person or institution or thing, that degradation then becomes internal. It's an internal kind of inception corruption. These are all components of what alchemy involves, because it's a transmutation of a conscious experience. But in order to understand that, you have to really get a grasp on the fact that language is a lot. It's a lot. It's a big component of what we do. Now, the science component, this one's a little bit easier for people to grasp, right? When you think of science, what do you guys think of?
Chemistry.
Exactly, right? Chemistry, what else? Physics, biology, right? Those are sciences. Now, science can be either considered hard or soft. A soft science is considered a descriptive science. So all you geologists out there, I'm really sorry for you, in spite of the fact that you may be grappling with carbon dating and the fact that carbon dating processes are in fact influenced by solar output. Look it up, it's pretty exciting. It means all the dating that we've been using for carbon dating processes could be subject to a lot of variation based on solar output. And the assumption that our star is consistently putting out the same degree of solar radiation all the time is just absolutely fallacious. We already know that we've gone through a maunder minimum. We know that the solar cycles go through great cycles, and then 500 years ago we went through a mini ice age. So this star, and it greatly impacts the material construction of everything here. And when you recognize from a scientific standpoint, and the science I stand behind is electric universe science, meaning that it is a single cosmology that can describe biological processes, botanical processes, geological processes, the formation of stars, the formation of people, how your thoughts work, how smart fluids work up and down the phloem and xylem within plants. All of that can be described electric universe, one singular scientific theory, right, that explains everything because it's all electric. Quantum mechanics is literally diametrically opposed to that. And the moment you recognize that when you're working with a theoretical science, you're not actually describing stuff that's actually happening, you're describing what you think might be happening based on your limited perspective, then you might as well just be making stuff all the time. And there's tons and tons of sources on the Modern Alchemist channel under the Electric Universe where you can follow lecture series after lecture series with actual physicists, electrical engineers, geologists who are all looking at the universe from an electrical standpoint. Very cutting edge right now, but it's the way we're going to be going for sure. Science then is similar to language because it gives us a structure wherewith to use the language of alchemy. So in this class, we're not going to get super duper fluffy bunny because I want to give you the stuff that lets you get fluffy. Like for me, being able to conceptualize what's really going on and realize that you are part of an electrical process, a process of consciousness, a process of thinking, a processes of that every waking moment, every experience, whether it's yours or mine, or my dogs or my birds or anything else, these are an expression of a grander cosmic process. So that if you can feel a sense of love, if you can feel a sense of joy as a component connected directly to everything else electrically in the universe, you know that those two are qualities of the universe. It explains why mythological constructs were created by our ancestors to facilitate an understanding of these larger scoped things. So if you think of Zeus and all of his attributes, that's trying to put a personality on the planet Jupiter. Like give you the effect of what we feel when we're in proximity to that large electromagnetic body. Similarly with Mars. It really gives you kind of a sense that, and this is going forward a little bit, but giving you an idea of what alchemy can yield when we talk about sidereal astrology and astrotheology later in the course. It gives you a sense that our proximity to large electromagnetic bodies directly impacts how we feel. And we know that we're electromagnetically sensitive because when people are in their house, any of you out there who are paranormal workers, you know right away that if people say, I've got a weird feeling in my house and this spot over here always makes me feel sick or ill, the first thing a good paranormal investigator looks for is an electrical source. Because if you're sitting next to that, I've actually been in places where they're just like, I have my desk here, and every time I always get this weird feeling, right? Well, right behind on the other wall is a big power box, and so he's absorbing that output, and it's making him feel icky. And that's a consistent scientific thing that you can prove. So science is our friend at Alchemy because it will lead us to the actual truth. It'll break it down for us, and it'll facilitate for us various structures that are consistent. So if I look at a chemical process in chemistry, say, I can recognize the exchange of electrical potentials between different elements is similar and can be extrapolated upward on a cosmic level, say, if two stars are meeting. Because a star is positive potential at the center, and then all of the bodies orbiting around the star, all of the satellites, just like in an atom, those are all negatively charged receptive bodies, creating a diode, an electrical diode, electromagnetic relationship between the two that's consistent. This stuff stretches out. It's inside of you and it's outside of you, which is what makes, that's the magic to me. That's the part of it that's like, oh, gotta keep going. And the art, what is the art? The art is being able to draw a synthesis of all of this and then express it, to make real change in your life by looking at the systems that are in place and taking advantage of them. So really, you'll work it. If you recognize that a larger part of your community is thinking a certain way, let's say the laws of your community are a certain way, and you have a person that is harassing you or bothering you, by all means take advantage of whatever legal means are at your disposal, because you're literally leveraging all of the conscious agreed upon power of the community to your defense. That's what restraining orders were all about, as an example of a process of binding someone consciously and physically while utilizing an available system at your disposal. So it's all works into the same thing, and the art is to make that sort of so natural that no one even sees that you're doing it. So when you look at people like Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek, and the entire, and I'll be doing a lecture on Star Trek, by the way, on the 11th at the public library down here. So, and we'll be talking about Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek, and how he is an alchemist and magician, and how he surreptitiously concealed, and I'll be referencing it throughout this course, by the way, because it's just, he's the touchstone. The man literally was a genius in how he presented it, because he gives us a sustainable series of symbols that you can use that are practical and real. But we'll talk about that later. That's part of that art, right? If you look at Leonardo da Vinci, he is the ultimate, right, in terms of an understanding of science at his time, an understanding of sacred geometries, an understanding of processes of art, and then he has this vast understanding of Kabbalah. So if you look at the Mona Lisa, and you recognize that, for instance, she's sitting with her left shoulder frontwards and her right shoulder behind, she's kind of giving you a positionality of the two pillars relative to her body. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's embedded all over the place that's just like this. And when you start seeing it, when you see it in movies, like George Lucas or Steven Spielberg or any of these other guys who are throwing these things together, you recognize the reason that they're successful is because they're latching on to something that works. And the reason it works is because ultimately, it's our story. It's talking about us. It's our story. So, I'm right on schedule. I just love when I'm right on schedule. So how do we break this down? How do we make this happen for us, right? I'm giving you like foundation here. Any questions? Any questions? Universe out there? Everyone good? Okay. So, how do we make this work? Who can tell me what a prism is?
It's like a certain shape.
Yeah, it's a shape. It's a little triangle, right? So anyone who likes Pink Floyd,
Yeah.
the cover of their album, right? The light comes in like this, and then it breaks out into the 7 frequencies of the visual spectrum, right? It's really
We
cool.
can see it.
Yeah, that's what we see, right? The truth is, there's all this light all up and down all over the place, right? But the prism only works for us in this limited bandwidth. This prism is going to give you the functional idea of how to work your way through the language, art, and science of alchemy. And the way it works is this. Ordinarily, and each one of us, and by the way, it's going to show you how you can find your own personal fit. When you're done today, there's a personal fit for everyone. There's literally a personal fit to work this so that your foundation will be different. Not all of us are scientists. Some of you are artists, which means art is your foundation. But that means that art's going to be attenuated by language and science at some point, because otherwise, what the heck, right? So Leonardo da Vinci, artist, attenuating that with language and science, right? So let's look at this. So here's your prism, and this is mine. I tend to work with language first. And then what we have is science and art. Now the reason why I work for this myself is because I see science as a component of understanding the materia of the world, and that falls subject to Saturn. Saturn's the go-to source, intellectually, physically, whatever you want to draw from it, to look to, Kabbalistically, to understand how things manifest, right? So science then is looking at how things manifest, right? Whether it's a geological process or an astrophysical process or a biological process of just making babies. Science is that, and I believe science works under that. Art is an expression of heart, right? And the heart's on the left, so intuitively I just simply drew that art would be on the left because that's an expression of love as well. Because ultimately, your art is an expression of what is important to you. And what is important to you is an expression of what you love, right? That's just the natural chain of events. So your art may depict something that other people might be like, whoa, that's a little intense. But then again, what you love might be the revelation of that intensity upon your audience, right? So that's something to consider. But not everyone's like this. So if you twist it, and this I thank my wife for because she's like, people can't just visualize this. So if you flip it so that language is over here, and art, and here's your last one, and that's art is your foundation. Language, and science. So you kind of see what's going on here, right? And you can sort of see where you might fit in. For myself, this triangle flips around all the time. Because if I'm working on, let's say, a video or something, right? And I'm trying to edit together a bunch of space footage, like I did recently, the art is to try to paste that with music and have it all come together where it's like impactful, right? That's the idea. So when I'm meditating on that kind of function, then I meditate with art as my foundation. How do I do this? And then my eyes relate to these two concepts, where I allow myself to receive an input. The key in a creative function, by the way, is to never grab onto it like this. Some artists or writers, my father, who was a writer, was notorious. He'd grab onto it. I want to create today. I'm going to create. It's going to happen. And it never happens. Because you can't. Art is like grasping a bird and you just hold your hand out there and wait for it to light upon your hand. That's what you do. It can never be wrestled with. Science and language can be wrestled with. You can grab onto those with both hands and beat the snot out of them to get them to tell you what's going on. But art is a delicate flower that can be easily mutilated by mishandling. Something to consider when you're working through this. So you guys have any questions so far?
Nope.
Is this kind of hidden? Yeah. Yes?
That's it, I think I'm good.
Oh, you're good? Sweet. Okay. Anybody else? No? Yep. Everything? Sweet. All right. So, really no questions at all. This is like totally you got it?
Yeah.
Awesome. I am so happy. All right. So moving along then, when would you see this in play? When would you be looking at this in play in like everyday stuff? Movies? Exactly. What about a movie is relates to this?
The language, kind of just the talking, the communicating,
Exactly.
the message, the science, is the special.
Could be all three.
Yeah.
Depending on what movie it is, yeah.
Yeah, and the beauty is that you can see how in certain movies, like science fiction movies, the director will be manipulating this and flipping this around, right? in order to give you a perspective. And when this doesn't work is when they break their own rules, right? Because we're no longer part of that conscious experience. It's getting warm in here. You guys all right? Sorry, I took the cold air for myself. All right, let's take a look here. This is actually going much faster than I thought it would. We're going to move forward and lay some foundation for next week. Symbolism. What's a symbol?
A picture that elicits a feeling.
Okay. So a picture can be a symbol. Excellent. What else?
Or like a cross or something.
Yeah, yeah, a cross, like an object, right? Like a cross. What else? What else can you think of?
Emblem.
An emblem, okay? Like a flag maybe, right? Okay. What else can you think of?
Even like colors to this point.
Yes, colors. And numbers. And shapes. And then the other thing to consider with symbols is that no symbol stands alone. A symbol can only be interpreted based on its context, which is why in archaeology, it's so horrible when these guys have to go through and look at various archaeological artifacts outside of the context of where they dug them up, right? So here you've got, like, let's say a box, and it might have some hieroglyphics all over it, but the box outside of its context, it might have been sitting next to an altar at some point. Now you know the box was containing an offering, right? But the box by itself, I don't know, it's just a box now. And similarly, when you pull a symbol outside of its context, you lose the value of the symbol. And probably the worst thing that you can do to a symbol is misinterpret the context of the symbol. Meaning that you are looking for it being something that it is not. Ultimately, regardless of what this is, what you described as a symbol relates to something that's real. So a symbol is something, and this ties into the language component again. We're going to hit that language component a lot. But a symbol, then, is always pointing to your brain at an actual object. That's very important to realize when you start looking at things like complex symbols, which I call cognitive thought forms. A cognitive thought form is a conglomeration of a number of symbols put together into a singular thing. Like that statue right there. Can you hand me that statue next to you, the white one? Yeah, that one. Okay, this is a great statue. This is Mithra and the slaying of the bull. I was so happy that she actually had the statue because we're going to go into this at length. Ordinarily, when you look at this, what do you see? A dude. Yeah, a dude wrestling a bull, and he's stabbing at its neck, and he cuts it 4 times, and he's about to kill it. There's a little lobster guy grabbing at the bull's junk down here. There's a snake biting at the bull and a dog biting at the bull. Now, objectively, this is all you see. And for some people, they actually believe there's a guy, a god, named Mithra, who did this, right? They look at this literally, which is a horrible, sad thing, because you miss the point. This is actually telling you something that happened to us and our star and our history. We're going to hit on this many times. But Mithra's Sol Invictus is the sun that's burning right above our heads right now. It is the unconquerable sun. That is actually the literal name of this dude right here. So Mithraism then is a kind of solar worship, but it's based on the fact that they understand a particular narrative that all of us went through a very long time ago. And then they contain this narrative symbolically within this. To an ordinary person, this says very little. To someone who's spent what I've been doing, which is deciphering these symbols, I recognize that this here is a representation of the sun in Cancer. You might see it on a tarot card, on the moon card, where the little lobster guy is coming up between the two towers, right? So Cancer is when the sun is at its most potent. And when you realize that this is also him, and the snake is also him, and the dog is also him, they're all different manifestations of his power. They represent different aspects of what he does. So the snake then, the serpent, represents the regenerative capacity, eternal lives, and the gift of death, right? Because we slough off this life and we pick up a new one over and over and over again. The dog, and this is one of my favorite things about Romans, the dog represents sexual virility. So the Romans understood that there would be a component to our experience which would make us a little bit like crazy, you know, and that's actually the thing. Every religion that's been established under Saturnian order, meaning that it's a Saturnian religion. We'll talk about Saturnian religions later. I talk about it at length online. You guys are welcome to check all that out. But any Saturnian religion is one that's going to say sex is bad, you only get to have sex at certain times, and we don't think about sex because that's sinning. And that's because prior to this sun doing this to this bull, that probably was cycled like everything else, and that cycle got broken. So what's this bull? Right? Which drink gives you wings?
Red Bull.
Red Bull, right? Red Bull gives you wings. So the question then is, why would a bull give you wings? What's the deal with wings? And what's the deal with this Red Bull? The Red Bull is actually the planet Saturn as the protostar Cronus. Okay, that's a brown dwarf, and it burned red. And the mythological record actually bears this out. When we discuss Egyptology, you'll notice that there's a red star sitting, or red disk sitting on top of the head of Isis. Okay, the god Khepri, which is a little beetle, he's pushing a little red disk up in the sky. That's not this star. This star is not red. Hasn't been red, it's not red, it's too big to be red. That's not this star, which means that we've got a story that's broken down into language and symbols, and that's been preserved and stuff like this. And the way to understand it is a process of the esoteric known as mouth to ear. Meaning that unless you have someone like me explaining the code of what each of these symbols represent to the community that actually made this object, you will just see a guy killing a bull with some buggers underneath him. And that's it, and you miss the point. So this is the power. This is some of the power that comes from the study of alchemy. It's really cool that they're doing another one of these Tom Hanks movies coming out, right?
Inferno.
The Inferno, right? And I've read Dante's Inferno, so it's like great. I'm gonna have to see that movie for sure. But it's great that they're doing that because there literally is power in understanding this stuff. And when you understand that these tools, these ideas, have been preserved and that they're still in use today. We're doing all of this stuff today. We're talking about it today. It's in all of our movies. We just, we surreptitiously teach it. And anytime we objectively teach it, we do it wrong. So Gods of Egypt is a complete disaster. If you're following Egyptology, because the whole Gods of Egypt, I want to talk about that. So, any questions then about symbolism? Yes, please.
You said that the worst thing you can do with a symbol is misinterpret it. How can you be sure what your interpretation is at all accurate?
Excellent. The way to do it is to recognize that there's a certain fraternity involved with the creation of these symbols. And to recognize that each symbol is based on a recognizable human experience. So that if I pick up a cup, regardless of wherever I am in the world, pretty much every human being on the planet knows that'll hold something, right? And so I can use that as a symbol of something holding something. Say your question again, I got.
How can you be sure that your
Thank you.
interpretation is at all accurate?
So there's a toolbox that I'm going to be giving you guys, not a physical one, but this toolbox is essentially a series of confirmable. I've been basically confirming all this to myself for years. I would not be doing this if I couldn't guarantee that I couldn't predict what certain things would be like. And then I keep doing like esoteric smackdown on movies and stuff just to keep showing you guys it's the same pattern over and over and over again. So the toolbox is Kabbalah. It really is. Kabbalah is the secret language, and it's embedded within the tree of life and understanding what that is, and we will definitely hit that in the middle of this. But in order to teach Kabbalah, I gotta walk you through some of the real basic foundational stuff to get you to that point. When we get to that point, and you start learning it, and you start seeing that this dualism is being represented between two pillars, between two ideals, between a light and a dark, and when you realize the dark is not a bad thing, it's just receptive, right? And when you realize the light is not necessarily a good thing because it's active, like there are points, it's a broad scale misinterpretation to go, light is good and dark is bad, or dark is good and light is bad, because you need both. With one without the other cannot survive, because they literally define each other. And ultimately, alchemically, you're looking for a rule set where it's like as above, so below. So if I look up here and then I look in a microscope, I can see the same process. It might be scaled different, it might look somewhat different, but its operational principles will always be the same. In the same sense, when you're looking at this, for instance, a cross, here's the misinterpretation of a cross, okay? The assumption is that an actual person was fixed to that object, and that is some way is going to rectify any action that I've done. I spent a great portion of my life actually believing that, and learning it deeply and intricately. And the truth is, no, it's actually an expression of a astrotheological thing that happens, that we can observe. It's the crucifixion of this star between the equinoxes and the solstices. The entire book of Revelation, the revelation of St. John, right, the beloved, it's happened. We're done. Like that whole book is a description of our entire process and the fixing of this star between four fixed constellations, which are then the four beasts around the throne of God, right? And the hundreds, the angles, those angels, those all relate to points within the galactic circle that we're operating around. Like, once you understand all of the symbols which are being presented there and how they relate to the stars as they are now, and the fact that everything is okay, and that this star has pretty much electromagnetically pushed anything that's threatening out of us. Like, we're in the cherry zone here. This is awesome. Then you have to realize, this is heaven. It's not going to get any better. We got only ourselves to blame, which means everything we do here is fixable. Because there's no external force that's going to mess it up for us. That literally is the gospel that's played out in the scriptures. And we'll talk about the Bible because it's a great book. It is probably the most useful tool in understanding astrotheology, because what they've done is they contemporized older stories. So the biblical authors of the time are looking backward and go, hey, this story, let's bring this up today. Exactly like we do today. Every time we reboot a superhero movie or bring another older movie and do a remake, all we're doing is we're taking a great story that was familiar to the people in the 50s or 60s or 70s, and now we're telling it in the 21st century terms. Because we don't look at, like, if you have a spy movie, James Bond, it's absolutely reprehensible every time a girl walks by and Sean Connery slaps her on the butt. That was the 60s though, that was cool. Today, that dude's a complete douchebag, right? And I would do everything in my power to, but that's just because we live in a different time. So you update James Bond and he's not so much of a misogynist anymore, right? Because that just doesn't fly. No one's going to believe that. Men don't do that anymore. Well, James Bond facilitates himself as a symbol, right? When I think of him, there's a whole chain of guys sitting in a row, right? Like drinking martinis. So, and they represent something that's greater than just the actor, right? They represent a secretive society that has occulted information, that engages in operations which are outside the sight of the public. I mean, the thing that I think surprises most people is they get afraid of words like occult. They freak out. They're like, oh, it's the occult. And they don't realize that there is occulted information around you all the time. Whether it's your boss not telling you about the promotion that's coming up, or the termination that's coming up, or the new whatever. Or if you work in the military as I have, then you have a security clearance where you now for sure have occulted information, which is absolutely there for the safety of everyone else, right? That's what we're told. And it goes on from there to secret society. So it astonishes me when people are like, oh, you conspiracy theorists, you guys, you worry too much. And I'm thinking to myself, well, but we know that people keep secrets. And having learned 3 languages myself, I can tell you there's vast utility in being in a group of people and then speaking in Dutch to someone who can only speak in Dutch, right? Because now I'm conveying a full idea scope that is exclusively to me and someone next to me who also speaks that language, or French or German, right? So in the same context, these symbols and that language is being spoken all the time, all around us. And our ignorance is no excuse. Like, we just have to listen. And that's all I did. Like, I literally spent a couple decades. I stopped asking myself what terrible things were going on, and I started asking myself, why would they actually be doing the things they're doing? Like, what would benefit me if I was them in, I don't know, creating a movie company that embeds all sorts of esoteric symbolism from the beginning of the opening credits to the very end, you know? Maybe because when you embed stuff like that in and you understand what it's doing, you give it life. You breathe your consciousness into it. It becomes more than just a book or a story or a video. It becomes a component of what you are, and that's the art, the heart, right? All right, where am I? Oh, wow, look at us go. This is a lot of information, huh? Is it? Yeah, okay. I just realized, I'm like, you guys all need a break. Yeah, we're almost done. Got 10 more minutes in you? Yes? Yes? Okay. All right, I need a drink. So we're going to talk at greater length next week about symbolism, okay? I wanted to warm you up to that and get you kind of an approach to this idea of what there is to expect. That, for instance, just going back, just briefly understanding that this has more to do with it than just the dude killing the bull, right? You can see why some religions have said making a graven image is a bad thing. Because ordinary people will let in, they're like, oh, Mithra, and then they burn incense around it, and they think that this dude is going to show up sometime. I don't know. Anciently, that may have been the case. The truth of the matter is, no, they actually understand that this is something that they should go, wow, I'm so grateful. There's more to this story, by the way. There's more to this full story. And it's, oh, I just can't wait to tell it all to you guys. But foundation's important. Foundation's important. Okay, so let's get back to the prism. Okay. That's why I did this. Thank you. All right. I had to remember. Science. So, what kind of science background do we have here in this room, just out of curiosity?
Chemistry.
Chemistry? Okay. So, anything else?
Physics.
Excellent.
And general physical science.
Okay, no, that's all good.
High school education.
No, that's all excellent. This is probably the one place that all of us need to bone up on the most. We can all get a grasp of the language part. We can all get a grasp of the art part, because since childhood, we've had crayons and things, and we've built stuff. And if you let that go, if you release that, the science part, I'd like to say sadly, but I'm not actually sad about this. The science part is, without this, you will not be able to move forward with some of your understanding, because this becomes a backbone. Understanding, for instance, this is an atom, this right here, that's a hydrogen atom, okay? One proton, one electron. And this electron is a probability field of electron, which actually, in other words, you can't really get, this might just actually be just a simple field, as opposed to
One ball.
one ball, yeah. So we can see this, though, now. We actually have devices that can see atoms. and we can actually organize them. And they always organize these things into sacred geometric forms. And the reason why you want to know about that is because these kind of forms, the reason, I missed one. There we go. The reason that these geometries become sacred, that's the seed of life. And if you move out from that, it becomes the flower of life and then the tree of life, is because these geometries relate to these scientific principles. And when you understand that electromagnetically they organize naturally like this, like they will literally, you can watch lab experiments where they take an electrical field and they drop magnetic balls in, and they'll go boom, and they'll pop in together, and then they repel each other. Because electromagnetic is a kind of a draw together and then repel apart. It's the most amazing thing. So they'll pop in here, but then they won't touch. They'll just be like static around each other. And that actually gives you a sense of planetary formations. It gives you an option when you understand that these processes are tied together, and this scales up so that you have a big sun and a series of planets around it, and going off to Saturn. When you understand that this organization is the same as this organization, which is the same as a biological cellular organization, that science gives you foundation to latch onto so that you can look at the esoteric stuff and realize it's real. You don't have to like go into extra dimensions because there's plenty of stuff right here to do. You don't have to worry about, I don't know, there's so much that we make up that we forget that the stuff that's actually real is super exciting, you know, and that we don't have to make stuff up because it's way more rewarding to try to figure out why this works as to try to push your head into something that's imaginary, right? So this you can take to the bank. You can go to a lab anywhere, and you can see these processes engage, whether it's a chemical process or a process of physics or a process of electromagnetism or botany, but they're all going to be there as a component of science. And so don't fear science, it's your friend. It's the one thing that I always have, my students are always like, oh, science, I don't want to do science, because science is, you know, it means math. And math gets you right back to language. Without math, I can't describe anything. You know, math gives me length and width and height and durations, it gives me qualities. Math is really important, and the neat thing about math is it is our universal language. You know, I don't care where I go on the planet, I can bring an equation to someone and they'll be able to read that. And that's magic. That's amazing because math is the purest expression to me of language because it gets you right to the core, right? There's no doubt. Like, it's going to be this and it's repeatable. And that's important. You want that and you want to seek that when you're interpreting your symbols. You want to look at something that's repeatable. If it's always special circumstance and condition, like, you know, standard model physics is, you know, where we've got dark matter and we've got special rules for every black hole in the universe. You know, when it gets to that point, then you know there's no utility in it because you're always patching it back together, right? What you want is something that regardless of what you throw it at, it's going to stick and it'll have the same components, and that's what this will help you do, is recognize that those are all tied together. All right, that's all I got for you guys. What do you think? Is this good? Do you want to come back next week? Yes?
Yes,
Okay, great. So we'll be here next week, 12 o'clock sharp. Thank you, Internet. I hope you guys out there enjoyed it. Thank you, Samsung, for having an awesome phone. You guys need to get me a better one. And I'll be talking to you guys later. That's it. We're done. Yay! Thanks.